Welcome to Cybeats Powerhouse Perspectives, episode number 10. We have Chris Sistrunk with us with Mandiant. Chris has a background in electrical engineering, in actually the power systems before getting into cyber and cybersecurity, and is today one of the smartest, best, brightest, most sincere working folks in the industry.
Oh,
So,
stop.
Chris, right? Thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Oh, hey, happy Friday. Or is it Blur's Day? Blur's Day. Every day's Blur's Day.
Every day's Blur's Day. Where the heck are you?
I'm in the Mississippi Mandiant office, which is my house.
Right.
So,
and as I was saying beforehand, I love the over-the-shoulder, eye candy. I'm sure there's like a Winston Churchill trick in this, right? He used to put a pin down his cigar so everybody would wait for his ash to fall and not listen to what he's saying. So I think you're doing something similar right there.
It's just a cool way to have a background rather than a virtual background.
Right. Well, and it's honest and direct. The kind of things I always like about critical infrastructure. So as we do these things, we try to look at the past, present, future, and you're a perfect case, right? So I was thinking about how to learn something from this conversation. Thinking when you started, your career in the power system, you're a young guy, coming along, and there's people out there who've been doing it for a long, long time, and then you spent a long time learning from them until you were, one of their peers, and then switched sides, right? And those are the folks who built the damn grid.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts? I mean, when you first started, what are the things that stick with you that you learned from the folks who built the stuff that you were hired as an apprentice for?
Well, it actually started with my dad. He was worked in the substation as a relay foreman his entire career. Um, he actually started in the tree trimming crew because they didn't have an opening in substation yet. He was in the tree trimming crew for 6 months and then has been in substation ever since. Worked 30 something, 34, 35 years. And he's been contracting back for a decade.
Right.
But me as a kid, I always liked to hear his stories about what they were doing and, driving by and seeing power lines and substations. And I was like, yeah, I think I want to be an electrical engineer. But when I actually became one, or even when I was an intern for the power company, I always rode around with different folks, learning what they did. And when I started my job, I started out in distribution. And one of my first things I had to do was ride around with uh, service crew. Serviceman, one of the guys in Beaumont, Texas, took me around and showed me what he did, and went out with the line crew and helped them put up a 3-pot bank. Um, went around with the distribution automation folks, looking at the newfangled reclosers with these new smart relays that were kind of new at the time, and just having a little, and those conversations and helping riding around because I would, like the line guys, they would say, "Oh, you engineers, you think you're so smart." He wasn't saying it to me, but his experience with engineers in the past, when they draw it on paper and it doesn't work this way in the real world. And so I started listening from the day one, hey, it's good to get some feedback from people in the field because they're the ones that deal with it on a daily basis. And the same way with other, I guess you could say, old timers, had all that carnal knowledge of the system. And like even when I got into later in my career, changed into SCADA database, and then they moved me into doing substation automation work, doing RTU work and things like that. There was this one guy who had been this, he put in the first SCADA system in Entergy, Mississippi Power and Light at the time. And like, if there was a problem with the SCADA system, he could just call him and say, okay, what rack is it? Okay, well, tell me what the problem is. okay, go down to the third rack, go to the red wire on panel number 2 and jiggle it because it's got some, you know, corrosion. It's always that one that has corrosion on it. And sure enough, that would be it. And my dad even told me when he joined back in the 70s, the very first SCADA systems, they had these Westinghouse VisiCode telephone relay RTUs. They had digital inputs and digital outputs, and they called them clickety clacks because of the sound that the relay springs made with the contacts clicking. And they said over the phone, those engineers could troubleshoot what's going on in that substation over the phone by listening to it. So that just kind of gave me ideas in my career. One last thing before we go on to the next question you have is one of those SCADA experts that kind of started the new digital SCADA at the company. He told me how important it was to make sure you do things right the first time in the best way you can, just knowing all you can about a system. And he had a favorite saying: if someone made a mistake, which always happened, he would say, as long as you got a job, I've got a job. So I didn't want to be the one where he was saying that to me. And so, it's good to have that history of why we do things, but also having the ability to understand why, not just saying, well, we only do it this way and you can't do anything else. Understanding those engineering problems and then the context around those was really important for me to, as a young engineer. I believe you're muted.
It's what I've always loved about operational technology, critical infrastructure, and I love boats, and they both have an immediacy to them and a pragmatism to them that, theory, which IT can spread into, doesn't, right? The boat sinks or it doesn't. And in 1990 at General Electric, we made a 300,000, you would have known these things, 300,000 horsepower engine, gas turbine, biggest in the world. And the rotor wouldn't seat, this $1 billion project, they're lowering this 150-ton rotor down and it doesn't fit. So someone hit it with a hammer because that broke the vacuum welding, the bearing seated and so forth. So and your career and the time you've been at it has been fascinating, right? Because we're right bridging this bit, as you said, late 70s, early 80s, we're starting to, digitize, quote unquote, some things. And, in these systems that are, decades or centuries old. And if you look at, and how long we've been building infrastructure, 10,000 years, right? Built by the same practice, where guilds and so forth came from was, craftsmen getting together and saying, all right, we'll all agree not to do these impossible things. And now we have regulations and we have all the infrastructure we have, including the need to secure it. So you touched on SCADA and all those things. Security is an odd twist on all of this. When and where was that? And, how's that path gone from there to where you are right now?
Right. Is that the next question?
Yes, I think it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. What terrible life choices have you made, to lead you to the dark recesses of cybersecurity?
Well, it basically sucked me in. Whenever I grew up, we had computers and we had a bulletin board system and dial-up modem and whatnot, but we didn't have a hacking community. So I wasn't exposed to cybersecurity in that respect at an early age. I remember the first time and only major time that I know I was hacked was on Prodigy. Someone popped up, hey, I'm an administrator, what's your username and password? And then next month's phone bill was like $500. And I was like, oh.
I mean, I'm not laughing yet, but
no, it happens. I mean, I was naive and we all were back then. But, after becoming an engineer, going through this, having networks, learning networks, but I think cybersecurity in a way and because it comes with a intersection of being curious. What can something do? That's like an engineering hacking mindset. They overlap a lot. And I was like, oh, cool. It's like, I remember we had a kid had one of those remote control cars that would go straight and it would back up and do a J turn and then go forward straight. We found out that you could yell into a walkie-talkie at a certain frequency and make it do the same thing.
2600. Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, right. But I didn't know that from a hacking community. We didn't have that, and so I guess about 2006, 7, 8. That's when the birth of NERCSIP was coming around.
Yeah.
And I got exposed to a little bit of it doing SCADA databases and stuff like that. But, it still hadn't really hit really hard. And I was just like, okay, this is kind of curious. So I got into lock picking for some reason. And then 2008, 2009, well, 2007, the Aurora generator test, that was really interesting. And that's kind of started adding more to it. And I remember that we had to go yank all of our remote access to all of our substation relays at that time and set up alarms when the door opened to the control house and also to the contacts on the back of the relays when they pulsed when someone logged in to the second level, they would pulse. And if someone logged into the relay and wasn't in the substation, then we know to roll trucks, or call the police. Yeah. So that started a little bit more, and then I don't have a drink handy. I should, but Stuxnet happened in 2010, or what? It was discovered in 2010, as we all know, and so drink.
Yeah.
That really was it. That was the one thing that really said, okay, this is scary enough, but also insanely sexy enough. Like it was like I had a divide in my brain. Half of me was scared, half of me was excited and wanted to learn more. And that's exactly the moment that I got really interested in it. And then I still did, engineering, electrical engineering for the power company. But then at the time I had a lab, so I started tinkering around in the lab doing cybersecurity like tests. And 2011, I took the INL red versus blue training. So the year after, and then that was just like all downhill, from there. I was being sucked into this vortex of, back then it was SCADA security.
Right.
It wasn't cybersecurity. It was SCADA security.
Yeah. Yeah. So, SCADA, ICS, OT, we have created our own acronym soup to drown in, right?
Absolutely. So that was a long-winded answer.
That's a great to your answer.
Question.
I learned some things there that pulse the logging in and monitoring that, and that's such an OT damn thing. And any hacker would love that anyways, right? There's a difference between, InfoSec and cybersecurity and hacking and so forth. Hackers in the maker community, is very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so if you remember things like controlling the power supply of a PLC to embed data in RF frequencies that you can pick up an antenna outside the plant, right? That's no surprise to an OT engineer because it's power and inductive things. Cyber folks go, oh, really? You can do that? I was like, yeah, it's copper.
It's modulation. It's modulation. That's all it is.
And okay, so I'm a hopeless optimist. I think all these things work out largely because they have to. Stakes are too high. You look long term, not just decades, but centuries. Look out into the future and say, if we have a problem now and it really can't be solved, that means it never can be solved and we can never have X, like the kind of advanced digital, IoT, EIO, IIoT,
EIO.
Smart. I want smart sensors. I want smart toilets. I want, smart crap buried into all the infrastructure around me to make my life easier and better, faster, cheaper, cleaner, so forth. And so does everybody else. And I'm kind of thinking we can't have that unless and until it's possible someday that what we're currently calling cybersecurity gets as safe. And I use that word specifically, right? As infrastructure. We literally can't have it. So therefore, if there's future versions of ourselves who know how we did it, we just don't know what they are yet. What do you think? I mean, how far away are we from that? When will the cyber part of infrastructure be as safe as the infrastructure part?
Yeah. So it's to your question that you spoke. It's like, when will cyber be as safe as some things? I don't know. I can say this. Going back to when I first started at the power company, the safety distribution safety lead was an older gentleman. He was about to retire. He had like 40 late 30 or 40 years of experience, and he said in the safety room with all the linemen and engineers, everybody said safety rules are written in blood, and that is what makes me think of what will guide cyber realm into being more safe and secure. When things are so bad, like I know for a fact that people are worried about people dying and whatnot, like the hospitals getting ransomware and those kind of things. But also, it's a lot of people are losing money, so that's another way. It's pain somewhere that they've got to stop the pain, and then therefore we're going to improve either cybersecurity or industrial control system security and whatnot. Now, going to your written question across the screen, when do you think ICS will be as safe as infrastructure they control? Well, that was the whole reason why ICS was invented, is because before we had control systems, we had to do things by hand. And there was no safety work practices back in the late 1800s, the Industrial Revolution. Hey, building the Brooklyn Bridge, people died. Building cars, people got their hands smashed. Right? And so automation, like Ford put in, and all these things, the safety as a practice, like as a, industrial safety practices became because of things were getting written in blood and they had to codify it. So I would say for ICS security to be as safe, I would say it needs to have like these pain points. And thankfully, we don't have a whole lot of them, to be honest.
Right.
And that's due to the due diligence of engineers and operators and OT professionals around the world. We're doing a pretty good job in managing that. Yes, we have mistakes. Yes, there are mistakes that's made. And there's incidents that are like Mother Nature and squirrels and other things that cause infrastructure issues to happen. Even cyber attacks, of course. But it's not something that I think will be ever completely eliminated. But if there is an issue that causes that much pain, like something's written in blood, that's where it's going to be something to worry about. Like what happened, another thing that's not cyber at all, it's like the Texas power grid during the ice storm last year, a year ago from this week. That's, hey, we've got to start doing some hardening and winterization. And the engineers have been saying, we've been saying this, but now it's time to break open the checkbook and let's do it, because people died. People died in that incident, direct and indirect, like having carbon monoxide poisoning.
Right.
So it's something like that's going to have to keep. That's just my mindset.
No, honestly, I mean, I'm always pushing this point, but I think the way you said it, OT has been remarkably safe, even though ICS may not have been secure, because the people who run OT, kind of to the point of the conversation I'm thinking about it today, people who run OT have been running complex systems for a long time, and they've gotten really good at it. And there's an immense amount, the IT world can learn from that. And it's it's process, and the fact that there is a safety engineer who has actually been on the job 40 years, early in your career, right? That speaks to the maturity of the systems.
Yeah, look at the signs behind me. Like
right.
The danger in multiple languages. At one of the iron, this is a sign from New Jersey zinc smelter. And it's like, hey, this is electricity. It's kind of new. Don't know a whole lot about it. Just I'm going to put danger in every language.
Yep.
And so
we can have our digital cake and eat it too, as long as we understand that it takes a while to build things, and they come with process and controls.
Yeah, and there's still a ways to go. We're not perfect. I mean, there's still industrial incidents like oil refineries having problems with physical issues with the process, and has nothing to do with cyber really. There's always things that we can prove, and that's what I don't think anyone is doubting, that the engineering, the OT, the operator community is going to not let that just, hey, we're just not going to rest on our laurels. We've got to make it better. And so, but we don't need to lose sight going forward when we're, hey, let's automate everything. I've got my toilet automated. I've got my toaster automated. I've got everything automated. It controls physical systems. We don't need to lose sight of the giants that we're standing on in the past. Hey, we learned these lessons in the past in other areas. So Grug and Ugg learned back when they were cavemen. That's just kind of
put the ventilation in the cave before putting the fire in the cave.
Right? Yes, because Grug's pretty stinky. They need that ventilation in there. So win-win. That's what engineers look for. A win-win. We got safety, ventilation, and the other guy stinks. So,
and it's warmer indoors. All right. I like building boats while they're on the water and so forth, and automating things. And it's always fascinating for me when I come down to something. It's like, I can automate that, but I'm absolutely not going to, right? Because that's the last thing to fail before I'm on the bottom of the ocean. So no, right?
Yeah. Speaking of those, it reminds me of like SpaceX say, well, that rocket didn't land on the boat, right? Let's just try again. Well, and then they got pretty good at it.
Yeah, just amazed, right? What amazing mammals we are. We can land a rocket from space on a boat in the ocean, ever, much less reliably and so forth. So
now people don't even clap. They're like, oh yeah, it's just
right,
just another thing. Yeah, my car drove me to work. I just read my phone, scrolled on TikTok.
Yep. Well, with that, thank you for your time. Thanks for everything you've done for the industry and everything else, and being a great friend and a great human being. And thanks to anybody else who's paying attention to this. If you need help with these sort of things, contact Chris. He knows everything.
I don't know anything, but I know a lot of people who do know other stuff. If you want to learn how to configure a PIX firewall, the man right here, Chris Blask.
I know nothing. Thank you all. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks, Chris.
See you on the internet.